Hey there. My name is Jaymz Bee. Welcome to my podcast. Every Friday I'm doing these things. You can go to jaymzbee.ca. You can hit podcast and you'll see my vodcast. It's a visual podcast. It lives on YouTube as well. But go to jaymzbee.ca because we can become friends that way. You can sign up for my newsletter. Tell me who you are. It's an easy way to reach me. And I want to thank a couple of sponsors. barberfinancial.com. Big or small, call Captain Paul. If you have financial matters, things that you need to know, he can help you out. He helps out huge companies and individuals. And then also Barbarian Steakhouse. I owe them a visit soon. I love the food there. And Aaron Barbarian, a great supporter of the arts, as well as a philanthropist for various charities. And I also want to thank everyone who goes to Patreon. It's a way you can make a difference. $5 a month goes a long way. Enough people are doing this to make this worthwhile. It's hard being a starving artist in the world we live in these days. I'm a freelancer, and it really means a lot to get your support. The other thing is clubs. I want to promote clubs because I love the scene here in Toronto. So for the next little bit, I'm going to tell you what's happening in the next week. This being, of course, July 19th. When this is over, long interview with Bob Wiseman. The guy is so incredible. He's made so many records, over a dozen records of his own. Of course, he played with Blue Rodeo for a long time. TV, theater, 32 compositions for film. The guy's so busy. He's jazz educator, or music educator, just so busy. So we're going to talk to him in just a little bit. Speaking of jazz, Old Mill Toronto has some fun stuff. Tonight, Fern Linston is there. She picked up a Juno nomination for one of her albums, and she is a composer, a singer, a pianist. She's with George Kohler on bass and Colleen Allen on sax. That's happening tonight, 7:30 to 10:30 at Homesmith Bar, Old Mill, Toronto. And Danny McErlane, another great pianist, is there with his trio tomorrow. And a week Friday, Jay Danley, the great guitar player, will be there. So Faye Olson books really good music at the Homesmith Bar. Check it all out at oldmilltoronto.com. Hughes Room, Mark Lettieri, the guitarist for Snarky Puppy, is over at Old Hughes Room Live. That's tonight, and tomorrow something really cool called Song Studio. Barbara Lika, Tom Wilson, and others are going to be there talking about the craft of songwriting and then performing for you. A couple more things. On Monday, July 22nd, Monkey House or at Hughes Room. Don Breithaupt is a freaking genius. He is a producer, he is a composer, he's a pianist, and he has a killer band. He has Pat Kilbride on bass, Mark Kelso on drums, Justin Avedon on guitar, and that's on Monday. If you're a fan of Steely Dan, you're going to love the kind of music this guy writes. It's really high-level playing, high-level compositions, and he's up from LA for a special gig. So that's Monday. I hope to see you at Hughes Room. And what else is happening? Oh, a free admission show coming up on Thursday. Song Studio Gala. It's over a dozen singers working with an all-star band and kind of doing music on the fly. They bring up charts and they just do it. Should be really interesting. And what else? Well, look at it all. HughesRoomLive.com, because they got plenty of stuff going on there. And Jazz Bistro, tonight it's Bob Bruff, tonight and tomorrow night, Bob Bruff, Artie Roth on bass, Adrian Ferrugian on piano, and the legendary Terry Clark on drums. High-level playing and great food at Jazz Bistro. Also, Michel Berube is in from, I don't know if he's in Montreal or if he's just very east of Toronto, but he's rarely in town, and he's got a show called The French Connection. Marc Lalama is going to be there on accordion and piano as his musical director, and it's a lot of cool French music. So jazzbistro.ca, and always get there for the food as well as the music. Lula Lounge, another place with great food. Havana Club Friday. If you go early tonight to Lula Lounge, Aline Morales will be performing, and then later that night, Papiosco and his friends, and it is a wild dance party at Lula Lounge. Every Friday and Saturday, Cuban Fridays, Salsa Saturdays, and they've got two cool things there that I want to point out. Rolston String Quartet on the 23rd, on Tuesday, and Thursday, Robin Banks, one of my favorite blues singers. She's a riot, and she's really good. So lulalounge.ca, or just lula.ca for all the listings there. So I mentioned Bob Wiseman. He has played with Feist and Mary Margaret O'Hara and Jane Siberry and Maylie Todd and a whole bunch of dudes too. We're going to talk about his career, and I should tell you that he just left. I'm doing this intro after he left. we kind of start in the middle of a conversation, because with Bob and I, we just go. We talk for hours. He's a genius. And so we're talking about low budget films and TV and video and music, and how sometimes low budget and high budget, you can mix them together. So it's an odd way to start, but here we are. Right now, we're going in with Bob Wiseman.
Nobody would give a shit if it wasn't a high format camera. Everybody would
It's going to be on TV, right?
It's just because it's a famous person, and it's the content basically.
Yep.
And people are always focusing on that other stuff's interesting. You know, it's cool. The differences of quality,
Right.
but that's not the main thing. And most artists know that off the right away.
And what about the most expensive student art film ever made? Natural Born Killers. No, they use old crappy footage in the thing on purpose to make it look more real. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you spent millions of dollars on that.
Yeah, there was am I correct that there was a fight in that film, like with Tarantino and Oliver Stone?
Yeah.
About Tarantino, I think, distanced himself from it because I think he was connected to the writing of it.
Yeah.
But,
right. And then he didn't like where it was going,
it was
right?
great. I remember I only saw it back when it came out, though. I remember being knocked out. It's always the woman had a strange career because she's a Scientologist, right? Yeah,
Juliette.
Yeah.
Lewis, was it? Yeah.
And so like she seemed like she was a very powerful presence in that film, wasn't she?
Yeah. She was really good in it, yeah.
Yeah, it's harder for me to believe the other guy.
He's too known. Woody Harrelson was too well
right.
known already. It's like you gotta hire somebody like
Or you just have to be that much. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think I just didn't find him good enough. I didn't find him freaky enough, weird enough, psycho enough
to have been
really freak
that.
me out.
Right. That Bonnie and Clyde. They both have to. You have to believe that they would have gone for each other, right?
She had it. She could, because you knew it wasn't. You could feel that it wasn't far from where she could be. You know? But you knew
That's like Nicolas Cage pretending he's wasted or something.
Yeah.
It's just a little stretch. It's not too far.
Yeah. But great actors though, like say Daniel Day-Lewis, really blow it out of the water. You know, like that's. Did you know Tracy Wright?
No, I don't think so.
Well, Tracy Wright died almost 10 years ago now, when she was 50, or just turned 50. You might know her to see her. She was an actress, and she was around all the kind of times you and I have been around.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a friend of mine. She was married to Don McKellar, and and when I saw her act, you know, because you have friends in Toronto when you're an artist. Not everybody is like this, but you and I think, are similar interlopers. That I, anyways, like go to the theater world and like to go to the dance world and like going to the visual art world. It's not just about staying in my music world. And so Tracy was a friend of mine who was an actor, and I remember when I saw her act, it was unlike any other actor friend. This all leads to how I was talking a moment ago, because I didn't recognize Tracy on stage. It was scary. It was like
she was actually acting and not herself, and it wasn't your friend.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't see Tracy acting. I saw the character being the character, and it was so freaky. It was so. And I realized, this is acting. Like,
that's real acting.
Oh man, I wrote a song about her after she died. That's a funny song that you might enjoy, because there was a memorial after she died. It was an amazing memorial in the basement at Hart House. And she had a theater company with Dawn and this other guy who's a theater guy. I can see his face. I can't be. Anyways, yeah, they had a company called the Augusta Theater Company. And they did a play one time when they were all in their 20s. And the play was about an older woman who had died, and they were just going through all these artifacts of her life. So they mounted that as the memorial after she died at Hart House.
Cool.
It was really cool. There was 300 people, and I was one of the kind of 80 people that one by one had a moment to kind of take an object and talk about that in relation to the dead person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. And anyways, at one point, Sky Gilbert got up, and I didn't really get Sky Gilbert's stuff in the past. Things that I'd seen him do here and there as a Torontonian. Just didn't really do much. And I saw, anyways. And hey, and when he got up to talk, I kind of rolled my eyes like, Sky Gilbert. And he basically talked about the very thing I just was saying to you. He talked about how when Tracy was acting, how she like morphed with how she became the thing, and it made me cry because I just realized that not only it just was the most important moment for it. So I wrote a song all about that, and it's a funny song, and there's a video for it. You might even like to cut away to it in your thing here.
Yeah.
Because the lyric is all about being kind of stream of consciousness about what I was just saying. Like the opening lyric is, "I never thought I had anything in common with Sky Gilbert," and it's.
I always knew that I had nothing in common with Sky Gilbert. I always knew that I had nothing in common with Sky Gilbert.
Love that.
Yeah.
You, with your songs, you really do just right. You just, like, it can come from anywhere. Your inspiration seems like it can come from absolutely anywhere.
I guess anybody's like that, no?
I don't know if people quote their sources the way you do. You can make something extremely specific. You might do a political tune where you tell the story of someone rather than just saying, "Oh, it's wrong to put innocent people away." You really go for the story itself. You go for some detail.
Well, I admired a lot of different kinds of songwriters. You know, I got really into Warren Zevon in recent years. I heard him here and there, and didn't really do anything for me. I kind of checked him out, you know, because he had different claims to fame, and but never liked it. Never liked the production. And then a few years ago, I heard one of his songs by chance, "Lawyers, Guns, and Money," and the opening lyric was, "Well, I went home with a waitress, the way I usually do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too?" And I just was like, "What?" And I just found it so ticklish to my brain, the guy's mind, and I went and checked out the rest of that lyric, and I just went on a tear, like I'd say for like almost 3 years of like consuming everything that guy did, and it's like suddenly I really was way more moved with it. And anyways, you were complimenting my storytelling, but he is I really love the story. I like storytelling. I like people who tell stories and songs for sure. Yeah, there's so many different kinds of songs. Like right now, I'm finishing my master's at York University in environmental studies, and my final project is about how songwriting takes care of trauma. And I think that's a big part of what led me into it and what leads artists into being artists, you know? So I'm looking at 3 different kinds of songwriters, and it's really fun. Like part of why I took environmental studies is because they're all kind of wackadoodle hippie types, and so your thesis could be a bunch of songs. It could be a film. It could be writing a play. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, I want to go there, you know, because that's kind of more my people. I could like, so that's been fun. So I'm making a website for my final project of my interviews with these songwriters and with the lyrics to their song, and I'm filming them performing these songs, and then I'm writing like a long 30-page kind of paper about that whole thing.
Would those be local people or from anywhere?
They are local people. Yeah, I'm looking at. One of my I taught at Centennial College for about 6 years, and one of my students, who's a rapper named Akeem, is one of them, and another student that I had who's a young woman who came to study piano with me when she was 18, but that soon became studying songwriting, and she's still very young, and she had an experience of being traveling in Europe and being dumped by the friend she was traveling with, not a lover, but her friend, and it just kind of like sent her into a kind of a space of insecurity and anxiety, and so she wrote wisely. She like found a piano and she just wrote a song from the point of view of her friend who kind of dumped her. Like the song was written all from that point of view. I mean, I love that she had the creativity to do that, because that's like a whole other area of songwriting that's very exciting. I'm sorry,
No,
kind of
but it shows
switching
an
around.
empathetic side of somebody to go, I'm going to write a song from the other person's point of view. That
Yeah.
is probably very good for her spirit in a way, to just get
And
through
there's
the
very
other side
Very
of it.
few people do that kind of technique, right? Randy Newman's kind of, that's all he does. He kind of writes from a third person's point of view all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's outstanding, you know? Like, and people, and it's almost a bit of an intelligence test, you know? Because there's lots of people who like don't even understand what his song Short People's about, right? Who just think, the fuck is wrong with the guy? And
Yeah,
like,
why does
what's
he
wrong-
hate dwarves and midgets?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, that's not even, it's about racism. I mean, it's about like, just, you know,
Small-mindedness.
but it's a beautiful theatrical thing that he does of assuming a character in his songwriting, Randy Newman, and that's what she did. And the third person that I was looking at is Maria Cashton, who's like maybe in her early 70s. You might see her from busking around Toronto, but she wrote. She's like she's a pollination activist and an urban gardener in Toronto, and I think that's the way to put it. And Toronto's great, huh? And she and her husband were like attending a conference on gardening and whatnot, and her husband had like a shopping cart full of plants. This is 10 years ago, and he happens to have a heart attack and dies in front of the police station at College and Bay. And there's a defibrillator on site, and nobody came to check him out because they thought he was a homeless guy, and because they thought he was a homeless because of the cart and all that. But so what? There was an excuse to just not like go check in on him. As she learned all this later from the paramedics' recordings and whatnot. So she wrote a song about Fantino, who was the police chief at the time, and not being able to reach him. So she reaches him in this song. You know, it's like. Anyway, so I'm just making the point of how cathartic it is,
Right.
songwriting or art making. But
What
in
I
my case, I'm looking at songwriting because that's more my background for the people in environmental studies.
Right. What I think is interesting here is that you are working with, produced, or are friends with some of the most famous songwriters in the city or the country, yet the three you've mentioned to me come from completely different places. Eh?
Well, they're obscure, they're local, they're not famous, and I mean, maybe obscure is the wrong word, but yeah, well, they also are positioned differently. I mean, but yeah, it went through my head that yeah, okay, I could like approach famous people for this, but you know, there's way less complications to work with people that aren't famous.
That's right.
You know, like
Yeah.
so, you know, like
And it is about the songwriting, not about who wrote the song. It's about the process.
If I chose famous people, that would be that would add a certain level of distraction for the viewer of the project, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And for everybody, that would So
Speaking
that
of
would make
that,
people come for the wrong reason to look at the work.
let me give you, or ask you to comment on a few of these people you've worked with. For example, Ron Sexsmith. Rather than asking how you met or whatever, what did you learn, or what did you guys give each other when you were working together?
Well, it was a great time. It was a real fun time. I mean, well, you know, you didn't ask, but I feel like kind of telling you, like, look, because I met Ron. There used to be Sneaky D's used to be at Bathurst and Bloor.
Sure, in the basement. Yeah,
That's right, in the basement. They had an open mic in the basement, and I've just always been a fan of the open mics. That's kind of
This would have been 80s, early 90s?
80s.
Yeah, 80s.
Yeah, probably 86, I'd say. Yeah, maybe 87. Maybe 88. But anyways, it's one of those three for sure. Yeah, so, yeah, I heard him play there, and I told him about the one that I liked the most, which was Fat Albert's, which was on Wednesday nights at Bloor United Church at Huron and Bloor, which started as outreach to the hippies at Rochdale across the street.
Right.
That's how that started.
I didn't know that's
Isn't
how
that
it
interesting?
started. No.
It's like we're not of the age of hippies, right?
Mhm.
And so like, but for me, coming from a smaller place, Winnipeg, like the big deal about wanting to pursue music and coming from a smaller place and arriving in a bigger place like Toronto was the things that it had to offer that the smaller place didn't, which was like performance opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So that was always a very sexy, exciting thing in my mind in this to try and find in Toronto.
When did you get here? Mid 80s?
Maybe 81.
Mm-hmm.
I got here to study piano at York. But that's all I did. Like, I just did that one course and then I quit. I didn't finish a degree. I just I couldn't deal with how much money I owed from a student loan after that 1 year. I mean, it all made me nervous, and I did well. But I also I did well, but in this obscure thing of freely improvised piano music, and I realized there's no audience for this. Like, I don't care, but I'm also like trying to figure out, what do I do now? What can I do now except just get some straight job, which doesn't really matter. But you were asking about Ron. So Ron came to Fat Albert's with me, and he was like, I think like myself, he recognized right away how much more valuable that was than other open stages. It was unique, because like it may all be because there's no alcohol there. It might be as simple as that, or it might be because there was no. It wasn't really capitalism. Basically, in most places, it's someone owns the restaurant or the bar, and they want you to buy something, even though you came to play, right? And so this place, Fat Albert's, was run. It started as these kind of like, I don't know who the original people were, but they were like do-gooders, and they were doing it in a church, and there was probably no rent, and there was no, so you didn't have to pay anything, and that kind of point of entry for artists, it means so much that that money not be part of it, because so many people at that entry level have nothing, and even $1 can be an intimidating thing. If you do away with that, well, then everyone shows up. All sorts of horrible, boring things show up too. But you like, there's a film Martin Scorsese made with Dylan about his life. I forget what it's called, but it's Dylan talking about everything. And it was no surprise when I watched that film that's how he started when he got to New York, was going to the open stages everywhere. It's like, that's the breeding ground for... Right.
And even the bad stuff is kind of exciting because it's different than the good stuff. Right?
It's totally exciting. But because of that, I just never would bring a friend. Or because I would find every time that I did, they would look at me like, why'd you bring, this is horrible. And it's like, oh, you don't get it. And it's so it just wouldn't be fun, because it would be more fun to just be alone and make friends with the other people who shared digging being there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else did you discover in those open mics in the 80s?
Well,
were there a few other?
Yeah, Sahara Spracklin.
Yeah.
I'm still discovering her. Like, no one knows her, and she's still doing it.
She's incredible.
I know. No one knows her. And like, she's like, mid-60s now, and she's the same image, and so similarly dry and quick, and oh man, she's a documentary waiting for somebody to realize. It's totally brilliant.
Right on. No, she's brilliant.
Yeah.
And what about Bob Snyder? When did you meet him?
There.
Same time, right? Yeah.
No, Bob Snyder was probably 88 or 89. Kip Harness, Anai, Sam Larkin. Zillions of others, but those guys all stand out. Sam Larkin was a real big deal to me. He was kind of a crazy uncle to a lot of people there. Mm-hmm. He died 5 years ago,
Good guy. Yeah, that's.
Did you know him at all?
Yeah, but I didn't know that he died. I hadn't seen him in many years, but I remember from way back. Yeah.
Bob Snyder. Yeah, Bob Snyder really kind of struck a chord with lots of people, for the kind of humor in his songs, and he tried his best, and he's kind of resigned.
Yeah.
Retired. That's
what
I'm looking for.
Yeah.
To he originally had a place he's from Toronto, but he was born in the 40s, and so he was a hippie in the 60s, and so he lived the hippie dream. He went to the East Coast, and he found this community of similar young people in Bear River, Nova Scotia, and that just became his life. And but then he came back here as his mother was elderly, and he did some time here until she died, and he ended up getting a record deal, I think, with EMI. And but anyways, I did some touring with him too. But he packed it in, he went back, and he's been there. Like now he must be also mid-70s, and his daughter had a kid, I think, a year or two ago, and his former wife just died. So
he may not be coming back to Toronto. That one.
He won't be, but he is also. Before we started this conversation, we were talking about the rarity of people using the postal service. He's one of the other, holdouts. There's no email address for Bob Snyder, But the mailing address is amazing. Unlike anyone else in Canada, his address is just Bob Snyder, Bear River, Nova Scotia, and it just goes to him.
I'm going to send him a postcard.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who prefer mail, so Mendelsohn Joe has got to be one of your biggest fans. He has been singing your praises for decades.
Too. Yeah, he's a great friend. He's
How did that come about?
It just, if you don't mind me bringing this back in, I was telling you what I'm doing my master's in, and in writing my final paper, I end up telling a story about Joe off the top of the paper because it kind of positions the whole point of what I'm looking at, because I went through a breakup, a few years ago, and it just totally destroyed me, and I just was like, I was so depressed, I was so hurt, I was so like didn't know what to do, and I was living in the country at the time, and he called me at one point, and he could hear my depression and all that, and his response was like, Bob, you have to be writing about this. And I remember thinking like, I'm not going to write about this. Who fucking cares about songs? Bob, no, that's what we do. We're songwriters, and other people can't do that. They're stuck if this happens. They're in a different kind of, but you can write a song about it. That's like your superpower. That's your secret weapon. You could, and I couldn't wait to get him off the phone and start writing. I kind of was like, ding, and that was a really great reframing of the value of being a songwriter. I mean, I love songwriting and everything, but I had not looked at it, maybe unconsciously. I hadn't consciously thought about it in that way. That I could help my own problem by writing about this. And I wrote a bunch of songs about that breakup from different points of view. From including being angry and hostile to being sympathetic and moving on. Anyways, all of that was really great, and it was kind of sparked by Mendelsohn Joe, kind of like saying that simple thing to me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's the nicest way you could talk about somebody without even talking about the details. It's like what he gave you was reminding you that this is your power and this is what you should do. I love it.
Yeah.
So when did you first collaborate?
With who?
With Joe. Because...
Well, I went... there used to be a magazine called Nerve.
Yeah, way back, yeah.
So I went to them. I mean, I was in Blue Rodeo, and Blue Rodeo had become a big deal. And there were things about Blue Rodeo that were feeling... It was becoming dysfunctional, almost as soon as it became big, like I wasn't liking... things about the way Greg and Jim did, turn things into something. The spirit of the thing when it started was very much about equity and us being a band. And kind of as soon as it took off, it then became about, hey, it's about the two of us, and everyone else is an employee kind of thing. And it was like, no one said that. And it was really hard to kind of make sense out of that. For me, as a younger person, I kind of felt confused, and betrayed. Sorry, so I was saying all that because of what?
Oh, early Joe days at Nerve magazine.
Oh, right. And so I saw this guy every so often in those days of Toronto too. He was an anomaly that I would see these cassettes for sale every so often at Ring Music or at other places by this guy, Mendelsohn Joe, and I knew enough that, and you'd see letters to the editor by this guy, Mendelsohn Joe, every so often. And often. And they were hand-drawn artwork or whatever, and I looked at the cassettes, they looked interesting, and so I went to Nerve magazine, and I was like, hey, could I do an article on this guy, and research him? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I called them up, or I located him, and I did an interview with him. I think I also wanted to meet someone who I kind of intuitively thought I might be similar to, that was in a band that has been popular and left it. And I mean, I hadn't quit Blue Rodeo yet, but this guy.
But yeah, he was in Mainline. He already had a big career.
And now he's an artist on his own terms or whatever. Mm-hmm. And whether that's easy or difficult, and so I was intrigued, and And I'm Jewish. He's Jewish. That was just other layers of interest for me to kind of like gauge myself against who's this guy or what's similar or dissimilar. Because I'm also So I did that, and that was really fun to meet him. And
Was he on Ossington back then?
yeah, he lived. I have my first video is on YouTube. It's called "We Got Time," and in it there's all sorts of slices. All three people that I've talked about earlier in this interview are in that video. You see Mendelsohn Joe there. You see Sam Larkin. You see Tracy Wright, who died, and Don McKellar, and Laura Hubert, and Pat. Let's just put trio. We used to be roommates, and they're in the video too. But so there were cutaways to all those people in this video, and so yeah, he lived. There used to be a tire store, and so the Michelin guy was there. And there was like a resemblance between the Michelin guy logo and Joe. It was kind of funny that Joe lived underneath that.
I remember. And his place was filled with paintings.
Always.
You could barely move. There were so many paintings.
Yeah, to the ceiling. Yeah, he had rules when you were in his place too. He would like, if you were in his place for the first time, he would point you to like a sign that he had pre-made. It was the size of a painting that told you the rules of being here. And I think there's two rules. I think rule number 1 was touch no art, and rule number 2 was see rule number 1. Yeah,
I love that guy so
he
much.
was also a very he was also a very vocal anti-smoker. That was among the things.
One of the first. Him and Ben Kerr were the biggest
right.
guys in the world at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you friendly with Ben Kerr?
Yeah. The guy who wanted to be mayor of Toronto.
Yeah.
He wanted no smoking in any workplace in the world. He walked from L.A. to Toronto to say stop smoking in the workplace.
Wow.
This is early stuff,
Cayenne
right?
King.
The King of Cayenne. A busker who deserves to be interviewed, but he's gone.
Yeah.
They named a street after him. Ben Kerr Lane.
Where is that?
Where he used to live at Greenwood or Donlands and Bloor. Donlands and Danforth.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's really cute.
That's great.
Another-
You're also friends with Chad Kolodny, right?
Oh, Crad. Crad Kolodny was crazy talented and very eccentric.
I remember seeing him, and after Sam Larkin died, Sam Larkin published, and I've never seen it, and I don't think anyone has, but someone told me that he and Crad might have exchanged their own stuff, and so then I tried to hound the person who knew Crad's archives or whatever, but it didn't work out.
Okay, so Lorena, I'm going to get her on the show to do a whole show just on Crad Kolodny.
Yeah.
And at the U of T on Harvard, there's a whole archival section of everything on Crad. All the books, all the cassette tapes, everything's at the U of T library.
Right, but it wouldn't...
But maybe not this
in his
thing.
own collection, he
Exactly.
might have had Sam's thing. And
Yeah.
I really would love to have seen that.
Another local hero who is really talented that you worked with, or at least were doing something with, was Robert Priest.
Yeah, that's right.
The poet, singer,
Yeah, that's right.
author. How did you meet him? Was that also way back?
Well, I'm not sure where to go with that story right now because I have Robert's. I've been working on a record with Robert for the last 4 years, and it's ready to be mixed.
Oh.
But he's kind of
Taking a little break?
yeah, he's taken a break, and so it's in limbo.
Yeah.
And it's been in limbo for more than a year, and it's like I think it's the best stuff that he's done. Anyways, how did I meet Robert? Because my older brother Ronnie used to play with him.
Oh.
So when you have older brothers or sisters, you kind of have a passport into whatever is going on in their lives by virtue of being the sibling. So, Ronnie was in a few different bands, and I always felt that I had a right. Was connected.
So of the four, you have three other brothers, right? There's
That's
four of
right.
you.
There's four of us.
You all came from Winnipeg to here?
Wouldn't we? Oh.
I know.
I thought you just,
Not trying to word that.
the oldest one, Howie, spent some time in Los Angeles and Montreal. He did his master's in film in L.A. in the 70s. Imagine that.
Wow.
UCLA in the 70s doing film. Guest lecturers, Hitchcock. He had I think he's got some other... So, my second oldest brother, Gordy, came here, and then he became a lawyer in Kingston, and Ronnie came here and went to music, and I kind of followed after Ronnie did music.
I remember Ronnie playing a piano, I think with a watermelon or something.
Yeah.
He had a lot of stuff in him. A lot of ideas. Loved working with him.
Yeah, I mean, I owe everything to Ronnie. Like, Ronnie taught me how to play the piano.
Is there anybody, okay, I know you worked with Danny Lanois.
Yeah.
Super sweet man. Did you ever... Did
you
Brian,
work with him as well?
He gave us... We were backstage at a charity event, and our guitar just wasn't sounding very good.
Yeah, you mean
and,
Love People?
Royal Jelly Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And he turned to my friend and said, "You want to use mine?" Because he saw I was having trouble tuning it. And he's like, "What?" So we did.
That's good.
We used his guitar, and he's the sweetest guy ever.
Yeah. He also... I don't know if when you saw him, but there's an electronics guy that he had different kind of... He had an electronics friend, strange guy who lived in a part of Hamilton, and this guy's name was Bernie Raunig, Raunig, and he came over to my place one time, Daniel Lanois, he played on one of my records when I lived in the country in the 90s. I lived closer to Hamilton, and he brought this amplifier with him, and it had a fantastic sound, and it was not a large, it was the size of a Fender Deluxe, and it was a great sound, and I asked him about it, and it turns out, and it was the guy I mentioned, Bernie Raunig, made this amplifier, and he basically made a series of amplifiers out of 16mm film projectors, just like kind of took the tubes from that and used that to kind of like power the speakers and whatnot, and it was a really cool sounding amp. That was a very cool story. And I bought, they were called Bernies for short, Bernie Raunig. I bought a Bernie. But it was like a who's who. There was like, I think there was only like a dozen of them made. And it was all kind of like, Gord Downey, like just like everybody, well, it was just all kind of
well-known people buying them,
that
yeah.
had a Bernie. And it was, but the coolest thing about that is one time it went on the fritz. I don't know, many years ago, I'm touring Western Canada. Bernie left Hamilton too at some point, and I don't know where he moved, but I heard he moved somewhere. And I went to his place when I bought my amp, and it was kind of like going into Deliverance. It was kind of a mess, and and he had kind of like trucker butt kind of guy in the back, and kind of like that's not. I mean, he might be a scholar of Plato. I don't know. I'm just describing the space.
View, the feeling.
Yeah. And anyways, I'm on the road, and it breaks, and I'm in BC. I forget where I am, and it's like, I can't really go to a music store with this 16mm film projector amplifier in its bus. And I wrote to someone I knew back in Hamilton, and they told me that where Bernie Raunig moved was actually like 2 hours from where I was right now in BC. And I checked out like the phone book, and I found him, and I go and he's there in his garage. And he was like, oh, and he kind of just like fixed it and it's working again kind of thing. And it was just too surreal. And it was like I had a day off that day too, to take 2 hours and go there.
It was meant to be that you had to go back and see this guy.
I don't think that way, but that's what most people would say. Exactly, yeah.
But you don't think that way?
Well, I don't think it's... I mean, it doesn't work that way. I mean, for every story of
it's meant to be. There's a million
a lot of stories where there's
right?
a car accident and you died too. Yeah. So maybe that's all meant to be, but it's like... We tend to say that about things that are good luck.
You're right. And did you ever meet Brian Eno?
Mm-mm.
Because your production has many levels.
I was a big fan as a teenager.
Yeah.
I had a friend, and we used to listen to all those, Before and After Science, Another Green World,
Mm-hmm.
Here Come the Warm Jets, Taking Tiger Mountain by Surprise. Those were
all
really big
4
deal.
records in 5 years, and 3 for Bowie, all in the same 5
Yeah.
years. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I enjoyed that music a lot. I said that's a really interesting point in that way because it makes me think of, Eno was, I don't know where to go with talking about that. It was really inspiring, but he also represents this other thing that, that's interesting to me for different reasons, which is, one-finger keyboard players, which is like, because from a certain point of view, I look at people that don't know how to play well, who play the instrument, and a part of me on a certain level dismisses them. That like, oh well, what? They pressed that, and it triggered a bunch of arpeggios, and you all think that's really cool, but
It's really
they didn't
easy.
do any work. They didn't study, But from another point of view, why isn't that fair? If we take away the judgment of all that and just listen only on the listening, do we find it cool or not to listen to? So why do we have to? Why judge it? It's different than that. So, anyways, I like those discussions, those problems.
Right. Why does he make a set of drums sound like they're in a wet paper bag? His mixing ideas were insane. I thought the music was only for me, and then I found other people who liked it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful experience too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I played clusters as a kid on the piano. I just found myself doing it, and it was like a secret, fun thing to do if my mother wasn't home, because she would be upset and think
that
I
you're
was
playing
breaking the piano.
Right.
And then at a certain point, I heard the musicians' records of established people playing that way, and realized that not only did I not have people been doing this before me, but some of them were live records where audiences were applauding after, and it was like real earth-shaking moment to hear,
right.
to realize that. Yeah,
they have other fans.
That the world will accept that.
Right.
That I don't have to be secretive about the fact that that's kind of stimulating to my brain musically.
Now, I'm not sure how to give you... the questions here are strange, because something like Wrench Tuttle...
Yeah.
Was that your first record?
Mm-hmm.
And Warner decided that one song was way too risky, right. And they recalled your records?
They destroyed the first pressing because there was a song called Rock and Tree, which was like about... the song was basically about... the song Rock and Tree is a conversation between a rock and a tree, and they're both talking about mankind. But the point is really about the murder of this guy who was the freely elected president of Chile, Salvador Allende. And part of where the rock is explaining to the tree, because the rock's been alive longer, that it tells the tree this story of how like humankind just doesn't learn from its own evil past. Mm-hmm. So as an example, it tells the tree the story of why Allende was overthrown and murdered, and attributes it to like the kind of corporate interests that were threatened by this guy kind of giving more specifically land back to the indigenous people of Chile, the Mapuche. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
And they had been relocated to reservations, and their rate of malnutrition and retardation was higher than other people, blah, 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 blah. What companies were involved in all this? Pepsi was one of the ones that figured prominently in the story. So that was part of in the lyric, was mentioning Pepsi. And that's what everybody was like, huh? What did he say? You know. And so then they were all upset about that. But then I just got them books that the lyric was based on. I kind of thought, here, it's all in books. Sue the guys who wrote these books. It's in public libraries. Mm-hmm. And then lawyers in New York and Toronto debated it, and eventually Stan Kulin, who was the president of Warner Brothers, said to me that he basically said, we don't dispute the research that you're providing. It's just how much whether the sales of your record will merit the costs of defending this,
in court if you get sued, right?
And that's not, and yeah, I get that, I understand, but that doesn't. I still think that you don't have to be a chicken shit about telling the truth,
Right. Now, I'm thinking of other times you got in trouble. Geffen, what was the story with David Geffen?
Well, it was it's kind of similar. That it was like I didn't get in trouble, but Warner Brothers was freaked out that I was making fun of Geffen in the song. Mm-hmm. I have a cousin who's a writer, who's a great guy, Morley Torgoff, and he's won like the Stephen Leacock Award for his comedy writing, I think twice. And CBC even did a TV series based on one of his books, The Outside Chance of Maximilian Glick. That was one of his books, and they made a serial out of that. So he told me at one point in the early days of Blue Rodeo, he took me aside and he was like, Bob, I don't know if you need this help or not, but I'm related to David Geffen. If you want, I could try to get hold of him for you. Like I was related to Morley on my dad's side, but on Morley's mother's side or whatever, he was related to Geffen. And I remember thinking, that's hilarious that you're related. he doesn't know him well, but he knew him when he was a kid, maybe a couple times. So that's why I had it in the back of my head every so often over the years that indirectly I could say I'm related to him. So I wrote it a song, and the premise of the song was about trying to reach him to see if he could help me with my career because we're related through Morley. But in the course of, but the letter I compose in that song also kind of like calls him on different shit that he's associated with. But it's not about having a hate on for David Geffen, because it's arbitrary whether it's, and you know, it's part of anyone who's a big shot in power is going to have
layers of people to get through to get to them or whatever.
No, it's going to have layers. It's going to have a history of stories of discrimination and bullshit. It's just
good and bad stories,
it's
right?
Part of like being in a position of power for many years. You know?
Yeah.
Like it's not about trying to like just call Geffen an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like about power. But from Warner's point of view, we are Warner, and he's David Geffen. You can't say that, like, or we'll have his law. And maybe they would. Like, he probably is a thin-skinned person.
Mm-hmm. And what about when you went as the name Prince? That's one of my favorite. You were actually going to be called Prince for a while.
Well, he put out a press release that he was no longer going to be Prince, and
You became a symbol.
yeah. And then, do you remember Lisa Mastrobuono?
I know the name.
Louisa Mastrobuono? I think he called her Louisa. You know where to see her.
Oh, Wheezy.
Yeah?
Yeah, Louisa. I do, from way back. I do remember her.
Well, we were a couple and we lived together, and I remember I was in the kitchen like that day or a couple days later with Lisa, whatever, making dinner or something. And I just suddenly realized I'll be Prince. Like, you know, like he's like not using it. And I called Don Christensen, who was my manager, and I was like, put out a press release. I'll like just, I thought it would just be a joke here in Toronto, just that like, you know, I'll repurpose the name because he's
not using it.
I'll recycle. You know? It's like,
right.
Yeah. And it kind of just exploded. Just I was on CNN, called me, and it was like in USA Today, and and then I got a letter on my birthday, which was fantastic. Like, talking about an amazing birthday present from Prince's lawyer, basically threatening to sue me if I pursued the matter. You know, like I think, because I guess they had to think this guy is seriously wanting to, and I'm like, you know, I'm not gonna. That's not what this is going on here. But you just added to the joke.
To this beautiful, huge
I
legend.
laminated it. And I had it in my toilet when I lived in the country for a long time. And then I wrote a play kind of about those two experiences, that the Geffen and the Prince thing, and actually the Allende thing, and many other stories that I performed in 2010 across the country, called Actionable, about, you know, the different lawyer kind of complications that I've experienced.
I love it. Now, when you're doing stuff, you're doing theater, TV, film, how do you approach these differently? Or is it the same, is it all the same to you? Like you go into a studio and you just create? Or do you approach them differently?
I don't know. It depends what you're talking about, you know? Like, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I'm like the same guy. I mean, you know, actually, the real answer to that question is like, there is no continuity, because you know yourself from, like, we're both positioned similarly to be working. So you work with someone that's a saint or someone that's an asshole. You work with someone that's mature or someone who's immature.
Right.
So there are people that like want to hire me to do some music and tell me they really want me to do what I do, and then as soon as we start, they're like over my shoulder every second saying, no, don't do that. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying from event to event, you're always sussing out, if you're collaborating with someone, what kind of a collaborator are they? You know, how creative are they? How, you know, like I remember I worked with somebody once who just was like, I worked on a music for a dance piece. Do you know Yvonne Un?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she hired me to do some music for a dance thing. I was very excited. I hadn't done any dance, and I'd seen some great dance things. And there was often really adventurous music in a lot of them too. And I was like, cool, okay. And I remember saying to her, okay, so like, what do you want me to do exactly? Once I went to a rehearsal and I watched them dancing, doing their things. So what's this about exactly? What should I don't know, you're the composer. Like, just like make something up. Yeah, okay, well, make something up that's like, do you mind if I use different kinds of instruments, or do you want it to be piano based? I don't know, you're the composer. okay, do you want it to be fast or slow or, I don't know. Okay. And I kind of thought, okay, maybe this is true, maybe this isn't true. So I made some stuff up. And I made some things that were really wacky, just so that she would then say, oh, okay, I didn't mean that. And then I played it to her and she was kind of like, okay. And she just kept rehearsing or whatever. And I called John Oswald, who I'm friends with, who works in dance and music. And I'm like, what gives? Like, what's going on? And he said, like, the world of dance is, there's a lot of women run it more than men. And men often are very kind of like in charge of what's going on and how to do it. And a lot of women are more collaborative. Whether or not that's the way to understand it or not, it really repositioned my thinking that like, oh, okay, she really wants me to just be the composer and do whatever I think. That's great. Because I was surprised to have that much freedom. It's not often that way.
Right.
Even when people talk the talk, they don't usually really mean that. Nothing wrong with that, but it's the way it is. And so you learn to try and, I kind of usually right away, maybe that's the shorter answer I should have given you right away, is I try to figure out right away who's in charge and what do they want, and how to, and how to, who can I talk with about, like I'm happy, I have a million ideas, that's easy to make things up, but am I making it up and all along you want it to be in G minor? Like am I making it all along you want to have a bunch of accordions no matter what I'm doing? Like tell me now, or maybe you can't tell me until you start hearing stuff. Okay, let's just figure it out. Yeah. So just being a good collaborator, is, I hired Graham Kirkland many years ago. He was my friend and he was a great drummer to play on a song of mine. And he was horrible in the studio because I couldn't say to him, could you do that? Could you do this? Could you do that? He just started to get like angry, as you know, Graham, and he's just like, and it was a real drag because we were friends. And I realized, okay, I won't hire Graham again, but I also realized if I'm in that position where someone hires me to do something, it's not about me insisting on my way. If it's their creative work that I'm hired to participate in, it's about me trying to help them get their vision.
Yeah.
Even if I don't think it's a good idea, they don't need to hear me go, that's dumb. Like, and they might be right too. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I got to keep. That's a really interesting thing in the world of collaborating and in the world of teaching. Is your bias, is having the interest in recognizing that you have bias and trying to kind of, when I started teaching songwriting at Centennial, a couple of the students in the class were rappers and they weren't interested in the things I wanted to talk about in terms of the structure of song, They told me, it doesn't apply to us.
Right.
And I'm like, I think there's a chorus and a verse in hip-hop too. I think I can find a bridge in hip-hop too. And so I had to just like find evidence of it and show that, like the way I was, because I was only showing structures, I was showing Burt Bacharach or I was showing pop music and so I had to realize, and they had bias, and I have bias.
Right. So they opened your eyes. Like students can open your eyes while you're teaching to go, I need to get more information.
There was a student that I didn't think was, there was a student that didn't hand in their stuff on time and they didn't seem very present in class, and I was kind of annoyed at their at what they didn't bring to the class, and I expressed it to my wife Magali one time, and she always, her instincts aren't really to take my side when I say anything negative, there's to come over to challenge me. And she started defending the person without meeting them, and I'm like, okay. And then the next year that same person was in a class that I was going to be teaching, and they were no longer, the first year they were identified as a bass player, and the second year they were going to be a singer, and I kind of thought, oh, now they're a singer, but they were a bass player, and they didn't do the other. I thought they were going to hold the thing back because I didn't like the way they were in the class the year before. And when we got to hearing them sing, well, first of all, I tried to make sure everyone got a space to do their own thing. When we got to the week where we worked on his stuff, there were a bunch of singers in this ensemble, and he tried to correct a couple of the singers when I was organizing the music, and he said to one of them, no, not like that. Like he said like G sharp, not G, and I was like, oh yeah, perfect pitch. And he's like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, you do? And I'm like, what's this? And like a E flat. Oh yeah, it's E flat. Yeah, well, that's cool. And then it was like, whoa, okay, the guy has perfect. That surprised me. And then he opened his mouth and sung, and he had like one of the greatest voices I ever heard. And it was like, oh man, it was like just an amazing lesson in like keeping my opinions in check, or just to hold it. Like, I'm glad I never was more rude, even though I was annoyed with him. I'm not saying it's wrong to be annoyed about someone being late and things like that, but it was really interesting to realize how much about the person I was oblivious to, that I wasn't really thinking anything else was there.
Right.
Yeah, and that there was a lot more there. It was like I've used him on the Robert Priest record and on other things to do background singing or whatever, because he knocks it out of the ballpark.
Cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned Don McKellar at the way earlier in the interview, and I really remember Twitch City. I think that show, I have no idea why it wasn't picked up and huge, but back then CBC didn't export a lot.
I've been involved with so many things that like everybody loved that didn't go anywhere, and I've pitched podcast ideas too that are I think are cool to CBC or whatnot. That you know, you keep trying, you know. But sorry, what's your question?
Oh, just with Don was how many times have you worked with him, and how well known was that show? Because I loved it so much. I just had a feeling everyone I talked to seemed to love that show.
I only worked. I mean, we were friends, but I only worked on Twitch City with Don. I don't think I worked on
any films. No.
I worked on a film that Bruce McDonald made called American Whiskey Bar, and that was him and Don and some other people, and Moses Znaimer. It was like a live movie made at City TV. But it didn't. I felt really shitty about my contribution. I was supposed to just make music up when they broke for commercials each time, and I didn't really have any direction about what kind of music to make or whatnot. And I think it was pretty boring what I did. I think it just spoke to me not really understanding what I don't think there was no feeling anywhere of understanding on that set.
Right. I've done a few of those back in the day, and the cameraman didn't know where to point because no one told them what to do. You just mentioned Bruce McCullough, and I want to ask you quickly about Bruce and Scott Thompson, and you are involved a lot in comedy. Was comedy. Bruce or Scott first? What was it like working with those guys?
Bruce, yeah. He lived in the annex, I think, and so did I. So I used to pass him on the street and whatnot. And but at a certain point, he kind of just became in love with what I had done. It was around, I don't know if it was when I quit Blue Rodeo or just before, but he started to notice. He heard my solo stuff, and he gave me some like props and interviews or things like that. And then I think he called me to write songs with him at first for a performance at Tarragon. Tarragon Theatre had a once a year debut called something like Spring Arts, and so we wrote some songs at his place. I had a studio then too on River Street, maybe both places, and he lived on Bain Street by then. He had moved to the east, and then that became. I think he was maybe checking out whether we could write together, because next thing I know is he's told me he wants to do a record. And he had already contacted or been contacted by a guy that did A&R for Atlantic Records in Los Angeles, and who then flew to town to discuss a budget and all that. And
now, was that These Are the Daves I Know? Was that on the album?
It was on the album, yeah.
Yeah.
The album was Shame-Based Man. So there's like 20 songs. Eraserhead, 50 Housewives, The Doors, not the Terrier song. Everything but the Terrier song was done differently. Yeah.
And then
my band is all Don Kerr and Hugh Phillips and Wayne Cass are all over it, and Tamara Gorski, who was Bruce's girlfriend then, she was in part. Do you know her?
I do.
Yeah, she's like
and Wayne Cass, the people you're mentioning, I forgot they were all on that record. I knew you were, but I forgot.
You know, the coolest thing about that record is it was a great record. It was so enjoyable. It was so much fun, and it didn't really go anywhere. And the coolest thing was cut to 7 or 8 years later, the 2000s, and I moved back to Toronto, and kind of felt like I was starting over a different time, and I started hanging out in comedy a lot, and a lot of the comics that I met would tell me, who were younger, 15 years younger than me, a lot of them would say, in high school, that was it for me, Shame-Based Man. Like, you produced that? Oh, I love it. And I was like, it was like so nice. They're like, oh, you know that record? Oh, good. And you know that record? And and it was like, you guys didn't realize you were going to be comedians when you were in grade 9 and 10, did you? But it's interesting, isn't it, that you went into comedy and you loved that record. But yeah, it was nice to meet people that knew it. Because my musician friends, they were more ambivalent. Most of them didn't really give a shit.
Was Scott Thompson, was it live that you did music with him?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Scott Catastrophe.
He is so dark. Wow, is he funny?
Yeah, that was, I guess that's 10 years ago. I think it was like 2009 or 2008.
Mm-hmm. Now you are, at the moment, you're creating your thesis.
Yeah.
Are you still doing any education, or are you not doing that at the moment? I mean, teaching.
I teach privately.
Mm-hmm.
And I pitch different ideas, like I've had podcast ideas that I'm interested in trying to get off the ground. I even had one that I sort of discussed with you, and I started doing some interviews for, but they were of, basically I just wanted to get together with different millennials and try to out impress each other with what music we think is cool. That's
a great idea.
I think so, but I've sort of recorded these interviews. And then when I listen back, I'm not sure if it works exactly. I feel like there's some missing elements. But I've done 3 of these interviews, and maybe I'll play them to you. But I wanted to make them slicker first and see what you think, if they might work in the radio places where you are. But anyways, I might do more education too. Like now, lots of people have been saying to me all along, "You're going to do a PhD. You're going to do a PhD." And I'm like, no, it's not. I just want to get this master's because I'm interested in doing other teaching. But everyone is like, well, yeah, but you can't teach unless you have a PhD. But that's not true too. I know people that don't have PhDs that are professors. But anyways, I don't know.
One of the things I just noticed that you do that most people should do more of, in my opinion, is you examine yourself. You examine the work you're doing. You have a level of a seat of the pants, but also pride that you don't want to waste people's time. How much of that do you do when you're composing a song? Because what you just said really, really hit me, because...
What do you mean I don't want to waste people's time?
That you think about, because you're thinking about a podcast, and rather than just recording it and shooting it out there, you refer to it, you look at it, you go over it and go, I'm not sure if this is exactly right yet. I'm going to still tinker with it a little bit. How much of that do you do when you're composing? I'm sure when you're producing, you try everything in the world, but when you're composing, how...
You mean when I'm writing a song? Or
yeah, when you're writing a song. When you're writing a song, well, actually, when you're making music, how much, I don't want to say doubt or second guessing, but you really want to put something out. I'm not sure where you draw the line. It's like a painter. When do you put down the brush?
It just can't be talked about it. It's like the question can't be answered, because it's like asking someone how they make eggs. It's like they'll play. They might add milk to it, or they might add cayenne, or they might add just the leftovers from. There's just no one. I mean, it's about their feeling, and it's about them improvise. It's about their skills as an improviser. I mean, nobody cooks the same way all the time, if I stick with that metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have more skill and confidence, and maybe they want to try things with spices that they're not familiar with yet too, because they're so familiar with salt and pepper. They're like, well, fuck it, I want it. So
right.
So I'm not trying to
offend your question. It's not one question.
I think that's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have no answer that's kind of really satisfying for that, as much as an interest in trying to look at it a few different ways. You have your own aesthetic, right? So, at a certain point, you're like, just that painting on the wall, that's enough, or not, or like so that's one of the things that I really got from Warren Zevon, from like the few years I found myself studying him. It kind of upped my game as a songwriter, because in Warren Zevon's work, there's a lot of focus in going the extra mile for the rhyme, and it's really impressive, and it really is hilarious to me. Like that lyric that I mentioned, I went home with a waitress the way I always do. Like, even that off the top was like, what? That's hilarious. And how was I to know she was with the Russians too? Like, he just started a story. He gave me so many kind of points of interest, but there's just a lot of layers that I enjoy. Anyways, or to put it another way, I know when I'm when I'm being lazy, and so basically I kind of try to keep in check that that green light that might come on when I'm being lazy versus not being lazy with my own writing, because it might be convenient that it's almost done. So here's a simple rhyme, and that doesn't make so much sense, but who cares? So now I can say it's finished. To try and say no, it's not finished until everything is hitting in the same way as the front end. If I was proud of the front end, I want the whole thing to hit. So that might be solved in a day, or it might be solved in 5 years.
Right.
So I don't mind that problem, because the payoff is so great if you do it right. If you did get it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ultimately just you. It's just your own aesthetic.
Well, let me see. 32 compositions for film, 10 for TV, 10 for theater. I can't even count how many records, so I think you're doing it right.
Yeah, thanks.
I think you are.
Well, one of the nice things Sam Larkin once said to me about songwriting was, it's about quantity, not quality, Bob. I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, he's just like, it's not about getting hung up on one thing. It's about continuing to not judge it and get a bunch of it happening, then stand back and look at it. And there's lots that's really valuable about that line of thought.
My way of putting it is get out there and fail, and then in no time you'll be doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What a
My
great
pleasure.
time.
Oh yeah, what time is it?
It's time. All right, Bobby Wiseman. Gotta love Bob. He is such a cool guy. And next week, I have another very cool person. It's Summer Lee. She is an activist. She is a photographer. I love some of her projects, and we're going to find out about why she loves Toronto so much. She's really amazing, young and pretty and punchy. She's got a lot to say. So sometimes you're going to see celebrities on this, and sometimes you're going to see people that you should know and maybe you don't. So join me next week for Summer Lee.